The apparent reverse evolution seen in ancient Egypt is a contradiction of the traditional Western model of linear progress, culminating in modern man. However, when compared to another alternative model of human history, the Yugas, the decline from a distant golden age through dynastic Egypt and into our troubled modern times begins to make sense. The Indian system of the Yugas explains a vast cosmic cycle, which, like the changing of the seasons on a grand metaphysical scale, causes mankind to periodically bloom and flourish, and then drift back into sleep, until the awakening and return of the next grand cycle. Walter Crittenden discusses these vast celestial cycles and their relationship with the ebb and flow of human consciousness, ability, and evolution.
The Yugas are a long-term chronology system that's accredited to the ancient Indian culture, the Indus, people of the Indus Valley. And it is a mechanism which enables civilization, man, to time man's patterns here on Earth over very long periods of time. And just as we have a day which determines man's activities in any given 24-hour period with its periods of light and darkness, and this is based on a celestial phenomena of the Earth turning on its axis. And just as we have a year, it's the 4 seasons caused by another celestial phenomena, the tilted Earth going around the sun, so too do the ancients say that we have a very, very long cycle that has its seasons of mankind, if you will, when there is a rise and fall in civilization. And they break this into 2 periods. And that's an ascending cycle of 12,000 years and a descending cycle of 12,000 years. And these 2 cycles themselves are broken into 4 periods. The 4 periods in the Greek civilization are Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age, with the Iron being the very darkest period and the Golden Age being the Age of Enlightenment. And Plato spoke about this cycle. He actually called it the Great Year. The Indians called these 4 periods the Kali Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, the Treta Yuga, and the Satya Yuga. The Yugas have specific characteristics. The Iron Age, or the Kali Yuga, is a time in the cycle of man when he is only aware of material objects, that which he can feel and touch and perceive through his 5 senses. And obviously it's a very brutal age when man isn't really aware of finer forces, doesn't have very good spiritual concepts, and just sort of pillages and plunders, if you will. And that is, of course, what happened after the great civilizations of the last Golden Age fell. And we all know that there's wonderful traces of that civilization in the ancient Egyptian culture, in the ancient Indian culture, the ancient Chinese, the whole megalithic ruins speak of a vast civilization. And all these ancient cultures, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Mesoamerica, all declined in the last descending age down through the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, into this dark Kali Yuga period. And the bottom point was about 500 AD, which coincided roughly with the final collapse of the last civilization in the Western world, and that was the Roman culture. And we muddled around in the very darkest age for about another 1,200 years until we hit the Dwapara Yuga. And the Dwapara, or Bronze Age, is a time when man becomes aware of finer forces. He becomes aware of molecules and principles that govern motions. He becomes aware of electricity. As a matter of fact, the Dwapara Yuga is often called the electrical age. And you can see just over the last 100 years or so how many electrical types of inventions have been developed, from radio, television, semiconductors, computers. They're almost an intrusion in our lives nowadays. This time between the Kali and the Dwapara Yuga was typified by a lot of rapid advancements in knowledge of finer forces, and we tend to call that the Renaissance period, the age of exploration, or the age of discovery. And now we've pretty much transferred from this dark material age to the electrical age, but there are still many dark material tendencies that tend to influence our society nowadays, as I'm sure everyone is aware. But things are getting better, and though we may be still very close to the Kali Yuga influence, we are rising fairly rapidly, and the Treta Yuga will take place in about another 2,100 years, and then that'll last about 3,600 years until we're in the Golden Age, and the cycle will repeat itself. People often ask, what are the higher ages like? You know, and why don't we find more evidence of the higher age? Well, I have to think that man is much more intelligent in the higher ages than he is in the lower ages. As a matter of fact, the ancient rishis say that a man only uses a very small percentage of his intellectual capacity in the dark period of Kali Yuga, maybe 25% towards the end of that Yuga, whereas he would use maybe 50% by the end of the electrical cycle, the Dwapara Yuga, 75% by the end of the Treta, and man is using all of his intellectual capability in the Golden Ages. The question is often asked, why don't we see evidence of a much higher civilization? And I think it's because as we gain intelligence, we realize that the world we're building right now in this heavy part of the Dwapara Yuga, when we're still very materially oriented, but just starting to harness the finer forces, is a very stressful one. If we just keep building buildings and machines and more freeways and raise the level of stress in the world, it's not a pretty picture for the future. I intuitively feel that the Golden Age is one that's typified by a return to an agri-based society where man realizes the beauties and benefits of nature and lives more in tune with nature. And so perhaps man doesn't build as many large structures as he needs to, particularly probably not out of metals that carry certain vibrations and oriented in haphazard ways the way cities are built nowadays. If we do find things, we might find them out of stone and have a different vibration. They'll often be aligned with stars or certain celestial events. And I think that is more typical of the Golden Age structures that we'll find.
In the legends and lore of each of these civilizations, and in the legends of tribal and traditional societies around the globe, there are similar accounts of a global catastrophe, a worldwide deluge, a former Golden Age. It seems perverse of historians and archaeologists to simply dismiss all these as romance, fantasy, and fabrication.
Modern-day academics discuss Egypt in terms of their beliefs. The Egyptians believed this, the Egyptians believed that. Supposing, in their arrogance, that we know better. They believed we know. But suppose it's the other way around. Suppose the Egyptians actually knew about immortality, and it is our academic community, lost in their rationalist beliefs, who believe. The Kali Yuga hits its nadir or low point around the time of the breakup of the Roman Empire, initiating in the Western world anyway, the so-called Dark Ages, which were indeed pretty dark, and over the Middle East and Northern Africa, pretty much a similar sort of dark age, less recognizable in India and China, although the scholars of those periods themselves reference back to much higher stages of civilization in the very distant past. And if this way of looking at history is correct, we're on an ascending curve at the moment. We're climbing out of an Iron Age and moving into the lower levels of an ascending Bronze Age. An interesting way of looking at modern society, because on the one hand we see very much a madhouse devoted, millions and millions of people believing in little or nothing beyond economics and monetary gain and consumerism and so on. On the positive side of that, what we do see is a tremendous creative and intellectual ferment, much of it from the spiritual point of view, very wrongly and destructively directed. But the ferment itself and the intelligence and the creativity that go into producing idiotic merchandise is nevertheless real creativity, real intelligence, real industry, real ferment. And on the optimistic side, if suddenly there is something like a worldwide recognition of the validity of this ancient doctrine of immortality, of the ancient realization or understanding that we are on this earth for a purpose, all of that, or much of that, or some of that ferment, creativity, industry could be turned toward or directed toward beneficial rather than frivolous and destructive purposes. It's a possibility. It's a reason, at any rate, for a kind of cautious optimism, whereas reading the headlines of any daily newspaper anywhere in the world would give us reason for nothing beyond the blackest and deepest despair.
Even though we have these Yuga cycles, we have these periods that affect the earth and mankind, it doesn't mean that every man exactly corresponds to that particular Yuga cycle. It doesn't mean that our free will is lost. We're just locked into these cycles. This cycle is just the context for mankind's life, just as a sunny day or a rainy day is the context for us to live a particular day. So in this period of time, you will see most people are becoming aware of finer forces, starting to understand electrical phenomena, but you still have some Stone Age people around, and you still have some very bright people around. And I was asked the question, is there a way to perhaps buck the trend, if you will, and live above the Yuga? And I think there's always that opportunity to improve our circumstances because we do have free will. And just as we can reduce our awareness, our capability to operate in the world by taking drugs or eating bad foods or participating in things that are not conducive to our well-being, and you do this over a prolonged period of time, you start to hurt your intelligence and your ability to operate. So too can man improve his ability to operate in the world and to experience a good life, if you will. And that's done by eating right, living in tune with natural laws, meditating is a wonderful way to accelerate the evolution, and there's some techniques of meditation, such as Kriya Yoga, which have been found to provide tremendous evolutionary benefits. So man is not trapped to any particular yuga that he finds himself in at any particular time.